Deer season's in full swing and hunters are looking to fill their tags. And I've been receiving a lot of really cool Moultrie mobile videos from several of the Growing Deer team members. Unfortunately, they don't share their camera locations with me because they've got some really good bucks showing up. I think there's a great lesson there. Their trail cameras are placed over pinch points. I can see it when I look at their videos. I know exactly why their trail camera's placed there, and that's where deer are moving, and not only moving, but good bucks moving during daylight hours. Pinch points are key for hunters to see and tag deer. Knowing that pinch points or bottlenecks are important for hunters, I wanted to take time and share a few of our strategies for identifying pinch points. And I hope these will help you where you hunt, and that way you can apply them and hopefully tag more venison this fall.
Golly, look at that.
Whether you're a landowner, hunt public land, hunt granny's back 80, or you've been hunting the same property or area for many years, there could be pinch points that you haven't yet identified. And if I'm going into an area cold, or I'm scouting a portion of the proving grounds too where we haven't been back in yet, maybe we only did prescribed fire back in there or whatnot, and we haven't really gone in and with that scouting eye looking for bottlenecks or fresh sign, one of the first things that I'm going to be looking for is a food source. Now deer, remember, have to feed every day. They have to consume a lot of food. And this time of year, food sources are changing, so I'm keeping that in the back of my mind. What's a current food source? But if I can identify that food source, I have identified a place where I know deer are going. And I kind of use that as my foundation. And then from that, I can back off and maybe back out 100 yards, 200 yards. And if I can identify pinch points to catch deer coming and going to a food source, to bottleneck deer down within 20 or 30 yards if I'm bow hunting, or maybe 100 or 200 yards if I'm using Winchester. If I can find that bottleneck, then I've got a really good chance of seeing a deer during daylight hours within range. Now it's important to keep in mind what that current food source is. Before acorns hit the ground, it could be a food plot, high quality forage, the greenest thing around. Acorns start hitting the ground, they're going to switch to carbs. They're going to start eating acorns. Is it a white oak acorn, which doesn't have as many tannins as a red oak acorn? If there aren't very many, they're going to hit those red oaks next. You know, understanding that food sources are changing is really important. And if you can find those limited food sources, maybe it's that big oak tree out in the middle of a food plot that's dropping acorns. Even though there's acorns all around, that big oak tree is photosynthesized more, and those acorns are a little fuller, a little larger, better tasting. Maybe that's the feed tree. Tagged a buck a couple years ago, and that was exactly the case. That deer came exactly to that tree. Even though there was acorns all around us, he came to that tree to feed. Now here at the proving grounds too this year, I was out scouting the other day and was picking up acorns. The acorns on the ground were mushy and soft. They hadn't fully developed and they were full of worms. A lot of the acorns we're finding are like that. Now if we can find some trees that have good acorns, solid and matured and fully developed, those are probably going to be the feed trees this year. So we've got to get out there, put boots on the ground and do a lot of scouting to find those trees. And then we can back off a little bit and find some pinch points as deer are coming and going from those acorns. Maybe you have permission to create some food plots, or you have in the past, and you know, hey, these are the food sources. Like those little hidey hole food plots. Hidey hole food plots in the middle of big timber. Man, that little attractive, it's only maybe 20, 30 yards wide. You know, any deer in that plot should be within range. That little green attractive food source in the middle of big timber, that's a bottleneck, that's a pinch point. Because out of all that timber, that's the green attractive food source. And we've got some hidey hole food plots here at the proving grounds too, planted in green cover seed hidey hole blend, and boy, are they looking good. And once you know it, we don't have many acorns, deer are in those food plots, head down, hammering them. Those little hidey hole food plots are currently creating some really good bottlenecks here at the Proving Grounds too. While we're talking about food plots, a lot of people think of food plots as that destination food source, and they forget that those plots, the design of them, also creates some bottlenecks or pinch points, and that's one reason why we really enjoy working with landowners to help them design a habitat and hunting improvement plan, because we help them understand that those food plots and their habitat all come into play to create bottlenecks to get them within range of a deer. That food source, a lot of people are just thinking deer are coming to a food plot, but how's that food plot designed? How are deer working around the edges of that food plot? When they're not going to that food source, when they're going to a different food source, or traveling to and from food and cover, how are they moving around that food plot? Somewhere close by, there's going to be some type of pinch point or bottleneck around those food plots. Those are the type of things we're looking for as we back off food sources, maybe a couple hundred yards, and we're looking at how deer are moving through the area. This is because deer are edge animals. They love to travel edge. So if you can find an area that has a lot of edge or habitat features meeting, maybe you've got a mature pine timber and it butts right up next to a recent clear cut, or it was cut 2 or 3 years ago and there's a lot of native stuff coming up, and that's creating a hard edge in between those two habitat features, or a food plot meeting native habitat. Some type of edge where two habitat features meet, there's probably going to be a bottleneck, and there's probably going to be some deer moving through that area. This is true no matter what type of habitat you're in, whether it's ag country or hunting timber. Maybe there's some type of feature that breaks that habitat up just enough to create a pinch point where deer like to travel.
Growing Deer is brought to you by Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's. Also by Green Cover Food Plots, Winchester, Moultrie Mobile, Fleet Outdoor Apparel, Morel Targets, RTP Outdoors, Fourth Arrow, Scorpion Venom Archery, Case IH Tractors, Ward Laboratories, Burris Optics, G5 Broadheads, Prime Bows, and Redneck Hunting Blinds.
As I'm scouting, I'm looking for food sources and cover. Remember, cover's going to change throughout the year. Early season, cover may be a north slope, shaded and cool. Later in the season, once temperatures begin to drop, that cover or security cover may change. It may be a south-facing slope receiving a bit more sunlight, where there's warmth. It could change throughout the day. So food and cover, how are deer moving in between? And like I said, I'm going to back off from those resources and then start scouting in between. And as I'm scouting, one of the things I'm looking for are those habitat features, those hard edges, and terrain features. Is there a subtle saddle in the topography, a low spot on a ridge where deer are going to like to cross that ridge just in that little low spot? And it may be just a little dip in the ridge, or maybe it's a bench on the ridge, 20, 30 yards down off the top of the ridge. There's kind of a flat bench where deer like to travel, and they don't have to go all the way up to the ridge. They just kind of side slope. At the old Proving Grounds, we had several of those locations identified, and man, they were great hunting locations because we were off of food sources and maybe next to cover, and in the morning here, mid-October, late October, we could slide into those, and about 9, 10 o'clock, man, the woods seem to come alive because we just see a lot of deer moving through that area on those benches. Those subtle terrain features can really be some great hunting locations. And those are areas where we're going in and we're looking for sign to see if deer are using those areas. Deer are kind of like us, right? They're gonna, instead of taking the stairs, they're gonna want to take the escalator to get up to a higher elevation, right? They're kind of lazy, kind of like us, most of us. and deer tend to use the path of least resistance. So when I'm checking these terrain features, I'm also looking for physical barriers. And those physical barriers may be subtle, they may not look like much, but they could really direct deer one way or the other. A great example is just like that bench I was talking about a few years ago. A big old oak fell during a windstorm, and deer were going on the high side, and they were going out of range on that bench. For years that bench had been great hunting, but that big tree created a physical barrier that deer were now having to go around either on the high side or the low side. And it just so happened a lot of times they're going on the high side out of range. But it was a great illustration of that physical barrier, just a fallen tree in the woods, directing how deer were moving through the area. That could be a fallen tree, maybe a rock bluff. You know, a few years ago, this was a really cool story, and we'll share a link in the description. Make sure you check it out because it was one of the coolest pinch points or bottlenecks that we'd ever seen. Grant was visiting a landowner and he had a bunch of old rock walls throughout his property. And where those rock walls had fallen over, man, there was a highway of deer sign. Deer were just cutting through those gaps, and it was creating some incredible bottlenecks. Now, we don't all have rock walls like that throughout the property, but I would suspect there's quite a few of us that have old barbed wire fences on our property. Those can create some incredible bottlenecks. A down fence or gap in the fence, deer are likely to be shooting through there. In fact, Micajah Goins, one of our team members, sent a video, and he had located a fence gap, and once you know it, a nice buck, daylight again, was wrapping through that fence gap. And if you look closely, you'll notice there were multiple bucks in that video. That fence gap was a physical barrier, and around one side or in that gap, it was creating an incredible pinch point. This is a topic we could sit around and talk about for hours, and because food sources are changing, everyone's terrain's different habitat types. But I think understanding just those broad ideas of finding those limited resources. Current food is usually one of the easiest to identify, and then backing off a little bit, finding how deer are traveling between food and cover, because you know where they're going. They've got to feed every day. They're going to seek cover, secure cover. So if you can find those two and kind of get in between, now you have a big bottleneck. Now we got to find those micro bottlenecks, those micro pinch point sites to get deer within range. And then we start breaking down, you know, is it a physical barrier? Is it a terrain feature? Is it a specific limited food source like a hidey hole or one big oak that's just, you know, dropping acorns? Is it a hot scrape line? You know, just know deer are traveling through there. What are those bottlenecks that you can now identify and get within your effective range, whether you're using a firearm or archery equipment, and you can hunt more effectively? And not only that, but you got to remember how to enter, hunt, and exit without alerting deer. And the great thing about these bottlenecks, these pinch points, is a lot of times you're getting into those areas ahead of the deer and you're cutting them off. And if a group of does comes by and you're looking for a buck, or a couple of young bucks come by, a lot of times they're passing you. And that way, by the time it's time to climb down out of the tree, they're away from you and you can get out of that hunting location without alerting deer. Finding these pinch points is a great way to effectively hunt more days out of the hunting season because you're not alerting deer. I hope you're able to get outside this week, maybe scout, look for current food sources or those bottlenecks, and create an effective hunting strategy where you hunt. Or maybe you just want to get outside and go hiking. You know, the fall colors are coming on, just starting here, but it's going to be a very pleasant week. Cooler temperatures are coming in. It's going to be a great time just to be outside to enjoy creation. But no matter what you're doing, I hope you slow down, listen to the Creator and the purpose He has for your life. Thanks for watching Growing Deer.